Welcome to the Oracle Scroll. My name is Kevin Walder, and I am your host, and I invite you to join my guests and myself as we discuss all things metaphysical. Welcome back to episode 13 of the Oracle Scroll. In this episode, we're going to get much better acquainted with the Wheel of Fortune, card number 10 in the major arcana of the tarot. In our second segment today, we will be discussing sacred space and how to create it in our own lives and demysticize it in the process. In our third and final segment, we have a question from a listener, Carol, and we will pull some cards to see if we can offer some guidance to Carol today. So, let's just go right to the description as written in the Tarot for Lunch Lessons from the Cards. This is what I said about the Wheel of Fortune. The Wheel of Fortune, or sometimes simply just the Wheel, is another member of the major arcana family and carries considerable weight when it turns up in a reading. As a major arcana card, the wheel will indicate the real question at the core of the reading. I think of the major arcana cards as the plot to our story. They set the tone for the reading and bring up the questions we are most in need of addressing at this time. This card, being all about change, is a strong indicator that some adjustment of attitude with regard to change is necessary. The wheel is just one of the change cards in the major arcana. Unlike the tower, this card speaks of change we can sometimes predict, or more cyclical change, such as the change of seasons. The wheel refers to the ups and downs of life and encourages us to make the best use of the down times to prepare for the busier season to come. Another piece of advice from this card is that change is inevitable, and stubborn resistance will not only wear us out, but stop our creative preparation for the busier times ahead. The time for planning is now, because in the hectic season ahead, we won't have time to fix it. When I think of the wheel, I am reminded that this system developed during a time in history when time was kept by the cyclical nature of the seasons. The only timing our ancestors were concerned with was that which revolved around their planting seasons and harvest seasons. Everything else fell in between, and everything else was secondary. They did not deal with deadlines the way we do today. The idea of linear time would be as foreign to them as circular time is to us today. The artwork for this card varies somewhat from deck to deck, but generally it depicts a wheel of the year with the seasons and various seasonal activities portrayed. It indicates the cyclical nature of life and how we move through the seasonal activities required of us. This card represents constant and consistent change, without which no growth can occur. When I see the wheel appear in a reading, it indicates to me that the querent may be resisting change that is necessary for their growth. This card encourages us to embrace the inevitable changes which occur in all our lives, because resisting change is a futile and dangerous undertaking. So the three questions that the Wheel of Fortune will leave with us: how is the energy of the wheel evident in your life right now? How has embracing the constant nature of change in your life enhanced your view of life? And finally, how do you practice living in the moment and allowing change to be a natural part of your life. And that was taken directly from my book, Tarot for Lunch, Lessons from the Cards, available now on Amazon.com in both paperback and Kindle versions. Taking it a step further, I've written an introduction to the Wheel of Fortune, and it's allowing the wheel to speak in the first person. And this is what I said. Hello, I am card number 10 in the major arcana of the tarot. I am known as the Wheel of Fortune, or sometimes just the wheel. To say that I am a card of mixed emotions and mixed outcomes would be an understatement. The thing I enjoy most is that constant motion that is life, the cyclical advances and declines of life. I know these are the very things which challenge humans the most, and I find them energizing and motivating. I like to think that I am the most recognizable of the major arcana cards. I mean, walk into any casino and you'll find at least one example of a game of chance that is based on me, on the Wheel of Fortune. I'm even represented on television with a game show in my name. No other card can claim such fame and notoriety. The wheel has long been a symbol of movement and progress, and the wheel was the first step toward modern civilization, allowing for the easy movement of goods and people into the unsettled corners of our world. Another example of a well-known wheel is the Ferris wheel, which has been part of amusement parks and carnivals for well over a century. This stationary wheel can teach us a lot about change. I didn't want to mention it right off since change is such a touchy subject for most humans, but change is my only message. And I'm here to state unequivocally that change continues, whether you embrace it or not. I make every attempt to be gentle with the change I present, but there are times when we all need a swift kick to the posterior to move with the inevitable change that surrounds us. If you think about that stationary wheel, that Ferris wheel that I mentioned earlier, when you board a car on this wheel, your view is confined to the immediate surroundings and maybe the person or the people that are traveling with you. At this stage, all you can do is anticipate the change that is ahead. Now, here's where there are two kinds of people. Are you that passenger who steps in eagerly and with a confident smile yearns for that hidden change to reveal itself? Or are you that passenger who nervously clings to every available support while questioning the wisdom of buying this ticket in the first place, clenching your eyes closed to protect yourself from the impending change? For each of you, the ride is going to be exactly the same, but your experience will be completely different. And the stories you tell will sound as if you were in entirely different parks. The imagery most commonly associated with me is loosely based on these stationary wheels and will often include magical symbols to trigger introspection and reveal the meaning. Let's take a ride on that wheel and see how the experience shapes your view of me. So when you step into that enclosure, you cannot see much more than the technician running the wheel and the crowd joining you on the ride, maybe some of the mechanics of the operation. Your perceptions are limited by your surroundings, making you even more nervous in your approach to change at times. As the ride begins to move slowly, your attention is drawn to the tops of the trees and the tops of nearby buildings, and by the time you reach the halfway point in your rise, the view is showing you much more exciting possibilities, and maybe even new ways of understanding your reality. Suddenly, fear of change turns to exhilaration as you continue to rise above the obstacles which kept you trapped, or at least kept your vision trapped. At the top of the ride, you can see for miles in each direction. You can now see clearly your destination and the changes necessary to get there. Compare this scene to the one you experienced at the beginning. There's no comparison at all, for you have just traveled from a restrictive, blocked view, which limited your vision and possibilities, to this new view from the top of the wheel, which boasts 360-degree panoramas, freeing your imagination and exciting your creativity. Perhaps the most important aspect of my energy is my cyclical nature. You've heard that old saying that what goes up must come down. So yes, I'm here to remind you that change is constant and cyclical. Nothing in life is ever static. There is always movement. While the ride to the top is full of anticipation and planning, the ride back down can be devastating if we haven't learned to view it properly. Just as the seasons change regularly and the dark months offer their own challenges, and we have to recognize that these slower, quieter times are just as necessary to our lives as are the busy, hyper-productive times. These down times are meant to be used to gather resources and information so that we're ready for the next ride to the top. We can make the most of our next ride to the top. I am sometimes associated with the Hebrew letter Kaf, which means palm, and the rune Jara, or Jer, or that means year, indicating that my work never ceases, and the ebb and flow of natural energy continues throughout the year. My planetary attribution is Jupiter, the king of the gods in the Roman mythology. Most of the cards in the major arcana reflect energies which can be developed or ignored by the individual. But mine, it's a little different. Mine's unavoidable. I represent the energy of change, constant change, inevitable change, and it's up to the individual to decide to what extent they will embrace or attempt to avoid that change. Just bear in mind that resistance is self-defeating and energy draining. It's all up to you whether you choose to just go along or actively participate in the changes which are coming your way. Remember that feeling when you were at the top of the wheel and the world seemed to open before you. Remember how that felt? That is the true measure of participation. Embracing the inevitable and making the most of the insights afforded you by constant and consistent change. And that is who I am, the Wheel of Fortune. In the second segment of the Oracle Scroll, we take a subject of current interest and apply a spiritual solution to it. This one is one I wrote about some time ago, and it's basically demysticizing sacred space and creating sacred space. And so this is what I said. Walk into any New Age bookstore or visit any New Age website, which is getting to be easier to find the website than the store these days, and you will find many helpful suggestions on how to create your own sacred space. They will vary by focus from aromatherapy oils and scents to candles, music, statuary, crystals, incense. All of these can be quite useful in creating a space separate from our normal routines in which to practice a spiritual path. Before you begin, you must first establish what speaks to you of spirituality, the symbols which will inspire you and help you to connect. In my own space, I use soapstone carvings as symbols for the deities, and I decorate my altar with several crystal spheres and obelisks. I created my own censer, as I could not find a commercially available one that seemed right for me. I also included a handmade wand with wire-wrapped stones and an athame, which I customized somewhat for this purpose, and a chalice and a bowl. Along with these items, which are considered fairly standard on a Wiccan altar, I use a Tibetan bell for cleansing with sound, and a shaman's drum and rattles. Seasonal changes bring new things to the altar, along with family photos. These items help me to create a sense of connecting and connection. Admittedly, I'm fond of ritual and I use it extensively in my own practice, but each of us must define what it is that sets ritual apart from everyday life. Ritual can take on many forms. It may be the candles and incense in a darkened room, or the flaming cauldron under the full moon, or even a moment of quiet repose under an old tree. Ritual should represent to the participant a safe, reverent, joyful connecting point that allows all the concerns of daily living to be put aside for a period of sacred time. Even when I don't feel I have had the time to prepare for a complete ritual, I will often light my altar candle and a stick of incense and spend some time thanking the Lord and Lady for the joys and challenges of the day, and requesting their continued guidance in my life. The ancient Celtic people lived their lives in a connected state. The hearth at the center of the home was where most magical work was done. It was their sacred space, and the tools we use today are the same ones they would have used, not only for their magical working, but to prepare their food for the day. Our ancestors created sacred space wherever they were, whether it was in that kitchen hearth or in the field during the hunt. Creating your own places of power wherever you find yourself when you need guidance. An outstretched finger works as well as an athame for casting a circle, or if even that is not available, visualizing the space you occupy as filled with light and love will do. All the recognized places of power we hear so much about got that way because people like us, or a group of people like us, focused a tremendous energy there, and we are able to tap into it even now. Sacred space is first created within ourselves. No matter how elaborate the ritual or how perfectly appointed the altar, if we approach ritual with a mind filled with worry, anger, or any other negatives, our intentions will be tainted. Think of it as cleaning out a room in your mind to which you will only practice sacred things. Know how to access this area of yourself and keep it clear of negative ideas, negative people, and emotions. Amulets can be helpful in this effort. By creating an amulet with love and power built into it, you will find sacred space anywhere and anytime you handle it. Just remember that magical power does not come from the space or the furnishings, but comes from within us. We may use a tool to help us focus in a particular area, but that is all it is. It is just a tool. The contents of a mechanic's toolbox are absolutely useless until that mechanic uses them to repair your automobile or whatever else. So don't imbue your tools with more value than they deserve. By all means, use them, but keep in mind that the power to operate them is coming from you. Sacred space is not some mystical power plant that we must find before we can expect to be successful in our practice. Sacred space emanates from within each of us. Wherever we find ourselves, we have access to sacred space. So before you make your shopping trip to find items for your altar or sacred space, identify your own sacred identity and begin building your sacred space within. Consecrate your space and your tools in the manner you understand and appreciate, and you will be able to call upon the guidance of the Lord and the Lady, the universe or God, whenever you feel the need or desire. In our third and final segment of the Oracle Scroll, we draw 3 cards from the tarot to help give guidance and direction to a listener who has written in with a question or a situation they would like advice on. Today, our letter is from Carol. And Carol writes, I have been going through a difficult time in my relationship and dealing with major changes at my work. And now I've even had a couple of little annoying accidents which haven't caused injury or even major damage, but I'm really stressed and I need some good news. Dear Carol, well, first of all, I'm really sorry to hear that life has become somewhat overwhelming with so many things to deal with all at the same time. But in response to your question, I drew 3 cards for you, and they are the Ace of Wands, the Fool, and the High Priestess. So the Ace of Wands jumps out at first and tells me that your work concerns are the issues which count the most for you right now, because they represent one area where you have the most control. Changes are happening, but I see them as opening new doors of opportunity for you. So this area is definitely worthy of your attention. Now the Fool comes along to remind you that staying in the moment is especially important right now. Worry and regret will eat up valuable energy you need to continue to work on your life and your future. The Fool is neither concerned with the past nor the future. His energy is all directed at the present, and his encouragement is to avoid distractions. Next, the High Priestess steps up with her own reminder to strengthen your own spiritual connections. Sometimes we add to our stress by not making use of all the support we have in our community, our family, or even our higher self. It is easy to feel like you are all alone and powerless, but the High Priestess is here to remind you that you are powerful and you have a great deal of spiritual support. So, summarizing the advice of these cards, they're saying that you will feel relief when you can shake off the stress, and you have many choices of technique available for doing that. You might choose a quiet walk, something as decadent as a nap in the middle of the day, or just plugging in some soothing music for a gentle time out. Continue to put your energy toward your work goals, for they are going to serve you very well, even if the particular arrangement you have now doesn't turn out to be permanent. You're making dreams a reality, and you can't afford to stop and rethink your decision every time an obstacle pops up. Remember to give yourself the same or more consideration than you do others at work or at home. No one is more deserving of your compassion and care than yourself. While the High Priestess is not the warm, cuddly type, she is a very supportive teacher when there are lessons to be learned. So be sure to ask for guidance anytime you begin to feel overwhelmed. The big thing to remember here is that challenges never last forever, and some simply don't deserve our attention. So choose your battles carefully and be assured you have the energy and the power to face them head on. I thank you, Carol, for your question, and hopefully our cards have given you some advice that is helpful. Thank you for joining us for episode 13 of the Oracle Scroll. Once again, as we say every episode, please spread the word. Share the connections with anybody that you know, friend or family who might be interested. We would love to grow our audience and get more people to benefit from these podcasts. We're having a ball putting them together. We just hope all of you are enjoying listening to them just as much. Any questions or suggestions, anything at all, please send them along to theoraclescroll@gmail.com. You will also notice in the notes at the bottom of our episode that we have a new Patreon page, so please visit that and help us out if you can. There are rewards available for those who do. If you have a spiritual practice that you would like to explain and promote, please drop us a line and we'll hopefully be able to schedule you as a guest on the Oracle Scroll. That gives you an opportunity to reach a new audience as well. So once again, thanks for joining us for this episode 13, and we look forward to bringing you episode 14. Bye-bye. Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Oracle Scroll. Find us on Facebook at the Oracle Scroll. If you wish to send comments, suggestions, or requests, please address them to theoraclescroll@gmail.com.